Hi, welcome back. This is a very short video just to respond to a question that keeps popping up. A good question, an excellent question, but also it's about, I guess there's many external influences when it comes to how you structure eating behavior. In terms of this program, the one that really stands out is intermittent fasting. You could say that the program and the structure that I encourage as part of this program involves fasting. Or you could say that the focus involves a structured eating schedule. And I go with the model that it's a structured eating schedule. So, for example, one of the examples I use is, and this is just purely because the numbers are easy for me to add, is that if you don't eat 4 hours before you go to bed, and if you sleep for 8 hours, now I don't know who sleeps for 8 hours, but I envy you, then when you wake up, that's 12 hours later. So when you wake up after 12 hours and your body hasn't received food, now your body is in a state of ketosis, which means that your body is actually pulling its energy from fat cells that have been stored. So I'm using those simple maths to explain how easy it is to achieve the state of ketosis weight loss. Now, but I wouldn't call the 4 hours of not eating before I go to bed fasting. Now, give away my age, but when I were a lad, it would be acceptable if you didn't eat a number of hours before going to bed, because we weren't exposed to as much food as people, I guess, are nowadays. And just because we didn't eat a few hours before we went to bed, we didn't call it fasting. We just called it not eating before you go to bed. I don't talk about fasting. I talk about allocating time in your day to feed your body, to allow your body to receive food. Let's say ideally, let's go off the suggestion from the golden hours and the magic hours, that if you don't eat 4 hours before you go to bed, and let's say you hold off 4 hours after you get up, now you've given your body the gift of 4 hours of ketosis, which is like a serious workout. Your body's burning up the energy stored in fat cells. Your body's burning up fat. But also you've given yourself 2 hours of autophagy, or the magic hours, which has incredible health benefits, cellular regeneration. You're getting younger. But just to use that structure, and that's just an example, because people have all sorts of structures in their lifestyle, things that need your attention at certain times. People work different. People work shift work. People have different obligations. So if that was the case, let's say then your eating schedule, let's say you go to bed at, what would you have to go to bed at? Is it, if you got up at 8 o'clock in the morning and then you started eating at 12 p.m., okay? And then you stopped eating 4 hours before bedtime. Let's say people go to bed at, we'll say again, 10, so they stop eating at 6. So this is optimum, if you like, in terms of an eating structure. Then you have allocated a time of 6 hours between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. where you allow your body to eat. So you could have, again, ideally, I recommend eat at 12, or close to 12 p.m. as possible if you're following that particular structure. But it's also about eating at the 6 p.m. mark as well. Maybe your last significant meal at 6 p.m. And then you can eat whatever way you choose in between. Now, the other side of that structure, just to put it in here, is that it's also about experiencing your food, chewing your food. So you're not eating massive quantities, not trying to get it all in that time. You're working with your body and you're giving your body the nourishment it needs, and you're feeling full, and then you stop. And then you might eat again shortly or a few hours later. But basically you keep your eating in between the schedule of 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. And again, just for the sake of repetition, using those numbers and that model. So how I approach this is not that I'm fasting for, do the math here, 18 hours, because that's miserable. Fasting as a language suggests deprivation, hardship. It also suggests a temporary, not permanent. People fast for all sorts of reasons, but generally it's got to do with a commitment, a form of hardship or deprivation, something I'm doing to myself for something else. And that can be a weight loss objective, it can be a health objective, it could be a religious objective, whatever it is. But just the word fasting suggests hardship. So I avoid using the word fasting. So I don't focus, or encourage you, don't focus on the time that you spend not eating. Focus on the time that you've allocated to eat. That's a very different dynamic, because now you're, let's say again, using this very specific model I'm talking about, and you can use any variation of that model. The main thing is that it's structured. But let's just go with that model from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Then you don't think about food until 12 p.m. and then you give your body food and you enjoy your food and enjoy the eating process from 12 p.m. and you have your last meal at 6 p.m. That's it. That's feeding time. So you focus on feeding time. And outside of that, you're not focusing on food. You're focusing on something else, other things. And your brain gets used to focusing then on other things outside of those times. So when you look at your daily routine, you're looking at your eating schedule, not your fasting schedule. You're looking at your nourishment time that you've allocated, not your deprivation time. And I can't overestimate the significance of using that language and taking that approach. And that's why you don't hear me talking about fasting or breaking fasts, because it's not about fasting, it's about eating. And that's why I call this a sustainable schedule eating program or eating routine. But the key is that it's a schedule, it's a sustainable schedule. It's what works for you. So if 12 p.m. and 6 p.m., those 6 hours don't work for you, it could be 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. It could be 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. or whatever variation it is. And again, of course, yes, we're following a similar sort of timeline flexibility as you would come across that you're probably familiar with in terms of intermittent fasting. But that's because intermittent fasting uses the same clock that we do, and we're all restricted to 24 hours. When we're talking about schedules, our language is going to sound similar. It's just what content we focus on. And I don't want you focusing on fasting because it'll get you down. It's just negative. And again, it suggests negativity, hardship, deprivation, and it also has a suggestion of a temporary arrangement that you're making with yourself. So I want you to focus on the time that you spend eating. It makes all the difference. Anyway, so I hope that answers questions that you might want to ask me, because I've been asked that question constantly, repeatedly, and it's a great question. Okay. Thank you.